Hi there, Divination Divas. Welcome to this current video. What a dumb thing to say. Welcome to this video. So this is going to be kind of like the one where I took out a tarot deck I'd never used before, seen before, and demonstrated how I could read with it even though I'd never seen it. This is really just a demonstration for how you can read it without even seeing it. It's not really about me at all. This isn't sort of a humble brag time. What I want to do is take this oracle deck, this sort of cartomancy deck, which is inspired by shadow casting with bones and curio oracle cards, and by Monica Bodersky. I've never seen this deck. I saw it float by my Instagram feed recently, and so I picked it up and thought this is a cool opportunity to sort of show that you can read with kind of any system if you have a foundation of what Camellia Elias would call function. I ask students, like, what does it do? What does the thing do? What are we looking at? So I want to demonstrate some techniques to show that you really can pick up a deck of any kind and experiment with it in a way that will yield answers to questions. Whether you enjoy working with a particular deck or system is a different issue. I tend to stick to tarot. It gives me what I need. I've learned over the years to do the kinds of readings that I find useful and that my clients find useful. And so I don't really need any other system. There were times in our sort of cultural divination exploration where, the thought was tarot did certain things well and Lenormand did certain things well and, never the twain shall meet. But really, even though I don't particularly work with Lenormand decks, I find it sort of limiting somehow. I stolen a lot from the way that Lenormand cards are read, or playing cards, etc., and applied that to tarot and gotten satisfying current, simple, clean, everyday kinds of answers to everyday questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do a walkthrough of this deck. I'm not going to look at the guidebook. I'm just going to sort of show you what it is I mean when I say you can do this. And what I want to anticipate the sort of reaction of is like, look, I'm not saying that what the creator wrote in the guidebook doesn't matter. Not at all. You should read it, and I think that it's really helpful. My point, though, is that it's not so much about relearning a new technique every time. In a sense, it's always, to me, fundamentally the same technique, which is a context. You know what I mean? And I like Monica's work a lot, so I don't want to sort of, that was one reason I picked. And this actually has a really chunky book, which I will be looking at down the line. So it's 46 cards, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, 46 symbol oracle cards. So what I want to do is literally just explore what it is we do when we divine with really any system. All right, so let me just put this over here. I think this is relatively new. Nice card stuff. All right, so I'm not going to look at them. I'm just going to shuffle. I'm going to do my 9 card, and I'm not even going to worry about a question at the moment. What I'm going to do to start with is just explore how what I mean works, or what I'm saying works. Cards are a little stiff, I will say that. That usually happens with more playing card-sized decks because obviously there's less sort of surface area to bend. So again, I only know that this is a deck sort of based on like charms and bone casting, etc., and did not, again, didn't really look at it. But what I want to do is talk about function. So the way I normally lay out this 9-part box is I put the center card down. We have card 3, the doll's arm. We got doll's head, which is card 4. So obviously I didn't shuffle these very well, right? But so that's the doll's head, the raven, the car. Yeah, these are all sort of, it doesn't matter. Long bone, bird bone, button, the doll's leg, and the raven's claw. All right. So not very well shuffled, but a theme starts to immediately emerge, which is parts to me. So we have the doll's arm, the doll's head, the doll's leg. All right. So right out of the gate, I have a theme that just leaps out at me. The other theme that jumps out too, or continues that, is the long bone and the bird bone, because even the raven's claw, those are also parts. So, like, I start to get a real sense of, like, individual parts that are sort of not coming together. Then we have the outliers. Now, the bird, we actually have bird bones here. So we have a bird, we have the raven. And then we have the other two that sort of don't fit the theme are car and button. All right, so I'm not even thinking about a question or working with a question yet, but I immediately have a theme of like, okay, these individual parts are very separated from each other, you know? And so that, as a reader, gives me a jumping off point to start talking to a querent about. You know what I mean? Like, okay, oh, there are all these fragments that don't go together, and we don't have all the parts we need. Like, it's a mishmash of different, it's like going shopping, grocery shopping, and just throwing random ingredients in the cart without thinking about the whole dinner that we're going to put together or the meal prep that we're going to do. So, you know what I mean? So I would ask, like, where in life are you starting to feel, or do you feel, or have you noticed a place where everything seems sort of disjointed, disconnected? You have some parts you need, you have some parts you don't need, you know? And maybe that's in their career, maybe that's in their relationship life, maybe it's in their mental health or their self-development, etc. But right out of the gate, I feel like all of these, you know, individual fragments, some go together, some don't, but they're not contributing to a larger whole. And so, like, what are the missing pieces? So there's like the first question that we can start to talk about as a pair, you know, as client and reader. Really interesting. And then there are the parts that don't really fit the theme, the button, the raven, and the car. You know, so what is a car for? What does a car do? It transports, it pollutes, it is a motor, it's an engine, you know what I mean? So I start to think about, like, what does the object do? What does a button do? A button seals or closes, for lack of a better term. You know, I'm like wearing a cardigan right now, right? It's the thing that would connect the cardigan together and hold it shut. So it keeps things together. Okay, here's something interesting. This button is doing all the work of keeping these fragmented things together. And it's a very worn looking button. It's very sort of old. It's in this case sort of a wooden button. It's you know, sort of antique. It looks like it may not last much longer. So that's interesting. So, okay, I haven't settled on the car yet, but the button is speaking to me. So, like, this button is doing a lot of work to keep all these fragments together. And then the raven. What is a raven known for? Ravens are sort of omens. They're ominous. But as birds, they also represent flight, escape, migratory habits. And the car actually connects to that too, right? Cars are migratory. So that connects these two. So now I have a whole story really quickly, without even knowing the individual meanings in the book about what these things suggest. That this person is in a space where everything feels really fragmented, disjointed, disconnected. They have some of what they need, other parts just don't fit. Everything is being held together by a really, really weak tie, and the impulse is to want to escape and run away, and that's not a good omen for us. Are there other relationships that I might see? I mean, right now, to me, as a reader, like, that's a great start for a reading. To me, it's like, okay, we have some shit to talk about now. I may not find the answer in this spread, because I think with general readings, they're a little more diagnostic. So I have a diagnostic now of what we should be focusing on. I would probably now do another spread to explore this, right? What can we do about it? What is the parts that are fragmented? How do we bring them together? Can we bring them together? You know, but I also know here that this fight or flight tendency, and this omen of, you know, this portentous omen of that not being the right thing, and how this button can't sustain holding everything together much longer, is a whole story, you know. And so I know you can't run away from this. If you run away from it, it's going to follow you. You know, and at the same time, you have to act on it, because there's only so much longer this button can hold all these things together. Now, there's a lot to be gained from looking at what is in the book around the bone, because I chose this deck partly because I'd never seen it before, but it is a deck that is based on certain systems. You know what I mean? So my point, though, is that you can start somewhere with cartomancy, regardless of what deck you're using. You can do this with Lenormand too. Let's just do another one really quickly, because, you know, this is, to me, is really fun. And this is the kind of thing that you get to do when you're not, so when you don't have any readings to do, any buddy readings or client readings, or you don't really have anything, or you're experimenting with a new deck like this, is to, like, yes, look at the guidebook, read the guidebook. Monica knows what she's doing, so there's a lot of cool stuff in here. But, like, as a reader, the fundamental skills are the same, which is how do you take what's in front of you, make it make sense as a collective message that speaks to the querent, you know? So let's say that we have a querent now who's concerned about the longevity, the potential for longevity at their job, right? They're maybe worried that the job may not be around really much longer. They're a contractor, they're hoping they're going to get to stay, you know, because of inflation and whatnot, but they're concerned and they want to know sort of where things are headed. So same story. I'm going to try to shuffle a little better this time, just to see if we can mix up the symbols a little bit more. Although in that example, because the cards were close together, we got fragments of a whole, but not the whole, and that sort of became, for me, the message of the reading. So again, contractor wants to know about the longevity of their job. So we have rabbit bone, hagstone, fulgurite, raven, again, beaver tooth, cargan, horseshoe, short bone, amber necklace. Now again, this definitely, like I said, has specific systems tied to it. And what I'm going to do in a minute is actually pull out another completely different sort of deck. But I wanted to start with something I'd never seen before, to just demonstrate that you can do it. You know what I mean? And you get the added benefit of having a book with a system that can tell you to do it. But when you get stuck, what do? Like, I don't know anything about reading bones. There's probably a lot to learn about it, and hopefully I would hope and hear a cultural history of where we get that. But I don't know that now, right? So I start at the same place. Like, I look at the middle. That's not giving me much because I don't know much about this bone, except that visually it shows me sort of branches, like a fork. You know what I mean? And those branches seem to be pointing sort of to the card here, and the fulgurite, right? The beaver tooth, the hagstone, and the fulgurite. So the point isn't that I know what any of this means right now. I'm starting to just sort of understand the context of what's in front of me. So I'm at a fork. I get the sense of like being at a fork. You know what I mean? And so now I would start to think of, like, what am I really looking at? Now, I don't know what any of this means in the context of divination, and I think, again, it would help if I did, right? But the hagstone is interesting to me because it looks like a tool that has been created for use, right? There's a hole in it. So that sort of is a man-made object. The beaver tooth is an object that is out of its element, right? It has left its home base. It is no longer part of the beaver. And so it has fallen out, theoretically, of its home. And then the fulgurite is an object that, you know, I don't know anything about, but it looks sort of natural and in its sort of innate state, right? Again, like, this is just an example. But so these branches sort of say, okay, well, here's this thing that's fallen out of its home base. Here's this tool that's been useful, and here's this thing that's in its natural state. We have the raven again, who, again, and the car, flight, omen, escape. So what I start to see are these, like, there are things that could happen. You could, you know, the decision may not be made yet. You could have to move out of what has felt your natural space because you're going to get kicked out of it. You're going to fall out of it. You may still be useful because you're in your natural space, but there's still something of a warning here that you have to be aware of, that at any time you could be told to fly away. and that's sort of the life of a contractor. Now, if I look at the other contexts here, this row sort of, I'm looking as a whole now, like your usefulness is sort of natural to the company, but their dedication to you is very flighty. Here, you may be asked to fall out of this habitat that feels natural, because the decision, I'm using this as decision, is made to let you run away. And then we can look at the bottom row. Horseshoe, often associated with luck, short bone, and amber necklace. So this is an interesting thing, right? So I don't know the cultural meanings behind short bones and amber necklaces, but I do know that this is a short bone, which may suggest to me, just contextually with the rabbit bone and the beaver tooth, the idea that this is a short term. Your luck is short term, and you may need to pray if this is where you want to stay. You know what I mean? So, again, is that a great reading? No. Would it be helpful if I read the book and learned the meaning? Yes. But why does this matter? Well, it matters because when you're stuck in a reading, no matter what system you're using, there are tools you can use to figure out what the cards are telling you, even if you've never seen the deck before and don't understand the system. You know what I mean? So what this is not about is diminishing the value of whatever Monica Berdowski has written here, and the work that she's done on the cards. It's just to demonstrate that if you have no contextual information about the system, no information about the cards, you can still get an answer. But the nice thing is that most of the time you do have contextual information with the cards. Most of the time you have read the guidebook. Most of the time you do know the system even a little bit. And so if you can get sort of an answer with a card system that you have never seen before and have no knowledge of, you can tease out meaning just by asking yourself questions about what you're seeing. Now, I guarantee that this would be a much better and more specific reading if I knew the context of these cards. But the reason I wanted to work with something I've never seen before is to show you that it is possible. And I think it's possible for anybody if you sit with what we're looking at. You know what I mean? And you don't panic. And this has been my curse through so much of my reading life that I have literally felt panic when it doesn't spring to life immediately. And even just to give you background, once I started laying out this particular spread and I realized it was mostly these bones that I don't have context for, I panicked. I started to say, maybe I should turn this video off. Maybe I can't do this, but I can. And the way that I did it was by just looking at the context of things and thinking about what they are in the world of this particular question, and the thing that kicked me off was this sort of branching of the rabbit bone so that I could then think about these. I still have no idea what fulgurite is, and to say that it's in its natural habitat is kind of a leap. You know what I mean? Kind of a leap, admittedly. What is it? Let's look, because I'm going to be done with this deck and show you what I mean by a deck you've seen before. That's card 14. Boink, 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 boink. Fulgurite. So it actually means an epiphany or secret. And its keyword is lightning. Does it tell me what fulgurite is? Finding a fulgurite on a beach is difficult unless you know it's a beach that's been struck by lightning. Oh, so it must be what happens when sand is hit by lightning. Ah, that makes sense. So see, oh, how cool that is, right? So as a reader, that's exciting for me, But so it's as a consumer now, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to read this and explore this deck. How fun is that? But the point again isn't so much that I'm a brilliant reader using this deck, but that we can sit with things even if we don't know anything about it and still do it, so that when we know a system or when we've seen a system before, we can actually do a reading. So now what I'm going to force myself to do is the dreaded Lenormand deck, right? Because we all know that I hate Lenormand. I don't hate it, I'm not good at it. And I stupidly did not bring a Lenormand deck out, right? So I'm going to have to go get one. But anyway, I may, at a certain point, once I've read this book, come back and talk about this deck, because it seems really fun. But let me just go grab... Oh, little Lenormands. Here's one. The old... Ow! My office is, as usual, in a state of chaos, but, more so than usual, because we've been digging out all the Yuletide stuff. Now, Lenormand is typically known as a system that wants a question. Let's do the same thing for the same question that I just read. So, if you watch my channel, I've taken classes, I've read books, I have taken more classes and read more books, I've watched videos. To me, Lenormand always feels like a language of consonants and no vowels, you know what I mean? But part of that is my own laziness, which I admit to frequently when it comes to, reading for myself, learning new systems. Again, Tarot gives me what I need, so Lenormand doesn't, I don't miss it. I feel like I'm not one of the cool kids because I don't read it, but I get what I need from Tarot, But the point isn't so much that honestly, I feel like if you're good at a system, then be good at that system. Why do you have to be good at every system? I think that you can get the same kinds of answers from each system. It's more about the reader. All right, so same question about this contractor who wants to know what the longevity situation is at their job. Are they going to be kept on? Are they going to be let go? We don't know. So what I'm going to do is not pressure myself to think too much about what I know about the cards out of the gate. I know the keywords generally, and I know that, for example, the death card is here, which a coffin card, which suggests certainly an ending. But we've got, what do we've got? We've got the garden, the birds, the snake, the anchor, the heart, the coffin, I think this is the clouds? I want to say it's the tree, but I think it's the clouds. Is there a little... No, it's not. The fox and the clover, right? So this is one of those times where, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see them a little better. The other cards are a little bigger. This is a time where as a reader, I'm like, oh, this is why I hate Lenormand. Now I have to okay, the garden is a community, the heart is love, the coffin is an ending, the birds are gossip, the snake is sly, or another woman, the anchor is draggy, it stops you, the sky, the clouds are... swiftly changing, the fox is sneaky, the clover is, good luck. Man, alright, what do I know? This person wants to stay at work for a company they work for as a contractor. They're concerned about the fact that they will be let go. That actually is entirely summed up by the middle column, the middle row rather. Garden, community, their workplace. Love the job, worried we're going to lose it. You know what I mean? Boom. All right, that confirms for me what we're talking about. Let's read the top row. Birds have a flighty quality to them. To me, I'm seeing the snake wanting to snap at the birds. The snake, to me, is the job. And actually, the anchor makes me think that there's a tricky relationship with the company, where it feels stable. It's not it feels stable. I think we've learned to love the thing we're afraid of, because the snake is going to attack these birds, and we're anxious about it. The birds have anxious qualities, right? And sometimes the card gets associated with stress. You know what I mean? So the stability of the job is actually, we're sort of stuck in a situation where we think we're happy, but we're actually in danger. So I may love the job because I've been Stockholm syndromed into thinking I should stay there, but actually the situation is I'm kind of in danger, because the snake is going to eat these birds. And this is just me thinking about what the object is. A snake is a predator. It's going to eat the birds. The anchor just makes me think of the job because, stability, but also being stuck somewhere. You know what I mean? I have another predator. I've got the fox. You know what I mean? And the fox with the clouds and the clover is an interesting combination. What does a clover do? They say clover's lucky. Clover is sort of ground cover. You know what I mean? That's one of its functions. So it also sort of creates the illusion of luxury and the illusion of grass and beauty, but it's really just covering the dirt. And so I have a fox who's sort of interested in covering up, and who's very changeable and very kind of moody, and so this environment is very strange. And so my question starts to become why would you want to stay there? Now, I still don't have an answer to the question, which is one of my fundamental core beliefs in doing a reading, so I'm not done yet. They want to know whether they're going to be kept or whether they're going to go. I get the sense that right now they're being used and manipulated for as long as that can happen. But let's look at the columns, which is another thing I do. So what is the purpose of a heart? We love the job. What is the purpose of a heart? It beats. It's an organ that keeps us alive. the organ that keeps us alive is very changeable and flighty. And so I don't think they know for sure whether they want to keep the contractor or not, because though this contractor is clearly keeping things going, they're very flighty and changeable. They're mercurial. They don't know yet. And so again, this is an environment that's not super steady. The middle column is the garden surrounded by the fox and the snake, and I have two predators that sort of bound this community, this place where this person so loves, but they're surrounded by predators, and they, in the reading to me, are represented by the birds in a way, and so they're just being preyed on. And so now the question comes to me, like, they might keep you around, but are you safe there? Are you actually liking it as much as you want to, or is it just fear about the economy? The last column has the anchor, the coffin, and the clover. This to me feels like, this is a dead-end situation that is being covered over by, clover. Looks nice, but actually it's a dead-end situation, And so stay or go, you're still at the mercy of these changeable predators, which is kind of the same answer I got in the last reading, but the metaphor was different. The metaphor there was sort of like, there's different ways they could go, but they're kind of flighty and they don't know. Here, it's that they're not only flighty, but they're predatory, and probably taking advantage of your anxiety. So, again, that's without using the typical keywords for the most part of the cards. Weirdly, I actually stuck to more Lenormand keywords than I would usually use for a demo, so let's just do one more. I'm trying to think of other cartomancy decks I have, but I kind of want to stick with Lenormand just to think about function a little bit more. What's another question we can work with? Let's say Susie wants to know, if going to grad school for art history is a good career move. Oh, there's the garden again. So now we have the scythe, again the fox, the rider, the cross, the whip, the book, the woman, and the tree. Alright, so again, we're looking at whether going to grad school for art history is a good career move. So, we already talked about the garden. What does a garden do? Let's not even go with any of the standard Lenormand meanings. What is a garden for? What does a garden do? In a way, it's like art, isn't it? It provides beauty. It decorates. It enlivens. It excites. It's also very unnatural. It is a contrived, designed, curated space. Very, very art school. Right off the top of my head, right? What does a scythe do? Well, a scythe has really one function, which is to function. It has one function, which is to cut and reap and harvest. So that, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I mean, in a lot of Lenormand readings, the scythe is bad. But, harvesting is interesting. Now, the relationship between the garden and the scythe is interesting. Is the scythe going to come along and harvest the garden? Is it going to cut the garden down? I don't know. All right. So, we're still early in the reading. We've got, now in the top row, we've got the scythe, the fox, and the rider. What does a rider do? I mean, a rider, is in Lenormand the messenger, right? Maybe that's what we're going here. But, what is the function of the rider? They don't really serve much of a function other than going somewhere. Going from one place to another, getting from one place to another. The fox, sort of divorced of its inherent, or not inherent, but rather its sort of applied meanings in Lenormand, is a predator, as we looked at earlier, is also a game animal. So it is not only the predator, but it is preyed upon by the wealthy. Interesting. All right, so the function of a fox is both to be predator and preyed upon. The rider moves from one place to another, and the scythe harvests. That's a weird combination that isn't sort of like speaking to me immediately. So what's the story there? What's the metaphor? I don't really care about the order of the cards, so and I do tend to work a lot with directionality. The writer for me is like the querent in this case, who wants to have a career move, right? Going from one place to another. They're going from one place into another where they are going to be put in a position of both predator and prey, and likely sent into the Reaper. So I get the sense already that the environment of art history grad school may not be the best. And having come from a creative grad program, I can tell you that you are often put in the position of being both predator and prey. And you are going to be cut down sometimes. Now, not all the time. Sometimes you get built up. But this person needs to know that this is an environment that is not going to be sunshine and roses. They are going into a situation where they're going to be preyed upon and preying upon, and that is going to be cutting sometimes. And it may have an effect on them, as it would anybody. So now we get into the middle column. I'm already starting to see that like grad school's a little bit risky because of that scythe card, which in this context seems like it's not great. But I don't inherently think it's good or bad the way we're supposed to. The middle column is the cross, the garden, and the whip. So now I'm going to ask the question again. What is the purpose of a garden? I know it's to beautify, to elaborate, to decorate, maybe to distract, to show off wealth. What does the whip do? What is the whip for? Well, it's actually meant to accelerate a horse in one situation, right? And contextually showing up right beneath the horse, or the rider rather, the whip accelerates the horse's movement. What does the cross do? A cross, again, has the reputation in Lenormand of being relatively negative. What does a cross do? I mean, it's a symbol of faith. And so as a symbol of faith, as a symbol of dedication, to me, there's a situation here where we're looking to accelerate our career path by moving into this sort of decorated world where we can show how faithful we are to it, how dedicated we are to our craft, so to speak, which in this case is art history. So really there's like an ego thing at play here. I want to get where I'm going faster by moving into this sort of decorated, heavily curated landscape where everyone is sort of an acolyte of the faith. I want to move into the community of the faithful, so to speak. Why am I moving this way? Mostly it's because that's the way the writer is moving. I could kind of, the community of, or the faithful are part of this community to accelerate their career. You can do the same thing. So now we come to the bottom row, and we have the book, the lady, and the tree. Looking at directionality, I see the lady is very focused on, and of course I don't have to do a whole lot of work here, because in this case this represents the querent. So if this were a relationship reading or something else, or if it were not a relationship reading, then I might have to do some more work of what does the young lady represent, or what does the main character represent. But they're really focused on learning on the book, and the book. Again, we're going to come here to the columns in a minute, but the faithful really go by the book. And she's turning away from the sort of longer term, roots that can be laid down. So the desire for accelerating this career by going to grad school is kind of ignoring the longer term growth that the tree, a tree doesn't really have any purpose. Well, that's a lie. A tree is imperative to our environment because they create carbon sinks, right? So they purify the air. They make it possible for us to live, but it's a slow process, and so in a way she's turning away from like the natural slow growth in order to dedicate herself to the book, to the system, to the education that she thinks is going to accelerate, but maybe going slower is better for the career. So I already kind of know that maybe grad school for art history is not the way to accelerate your career. But, I can look at the columns too. I really get the sense of like the scythe to me suddenly takes on a ritual tool here with the book and the cross, like almost like cutting people down is part of the faith. You know what I mean? And so you have to learn to be ruthless in this competitive art history field. You know what I mean? You do accept being part of this community as the querent, that you are going to have to be predator and preyed upon. And and the final column, the tree is sort of divorced from the accelerated movement, and it's slowing things down. Like your natural growth is slowing things down for you. So I guess if you want to move faster, you're going to have to do that, but that's the sacrifice. And so, if you want to really change who you are and become prey and predator, and really devote yourself to the faith of grad school, go for it. But it's going to make you more ruthless than you once were. And it's also going to shift your natural growth in this career. So, decent answer there, actually, I would say. So it looks like I can read Lenormand after all. But again, the point of this isn't whether I can do it, it's the point of whether you can do it. And what I want to do with videos like this is to kind of pull back the curtain and say you could start with a system you have never seen before, like in this case, the Between the Worlds deck, like I did, have no knowledge, and still come up with an answer that, for the question that makes sense. But we're never doing that. And so when we get stuck, we have tools beyond what we've been told the cards mean in order to fish out an answer that makes sense. And so for me, it's what I'm sort of sharing with you is the idea that you don't have to sweat it out. You just have to use different techniques, and the best technique that I can offer is function and context. And function, again, I want to sort of credit to Camellia Elias because she was the one who made me think this way. What is the function of a scythe? What is what I didn't talk about in the first example is what is the function of a bone? You know what I mean? A bone is a system that holds things up. It is literally the superstructure of a human body or an animal body, right? So to go back to that first reading where we had all the disconnected doll parts and bones, you know what I mean? There was like this thing that sort of wants to stand up, but like we didn't have enough of anything to make it do that. So they couldn't actually stand up because they didn't have all the parts they need, and they couldn't even decide whether they want to be an inanimate object or an organic object. So, again, like, I do these very quickly because I want you to sort of see the thinking that goes into what I'm doing so that you can start to find ways of doing it yourself. You're not going to imitate what I do in the sense that, like, when I saw the scythe as a ritual tool, I was doing a big no-no in Lenormand terms by changing the context of the card and saying the scythe is a ritual tool. Well, a real Lenormand reader would say, no, it's never a ritual tool, that's too tarot. It always harvests, it always cuts. Fine. Is that helpful to me? No, it's not. Because if I'm stuck in a reading and the scythe isn't cutting it as a scythe, I have to think of it in some other contextual realm. And in this case, the combination of this Bible-looking book and the cross, a symbol of faith, with the scythe became a ritual tool. And all I could think of was all of the hazing or oblique hazing that goes on in academic programs where you do have to perform some kind of ritual of faith in order to prove your dedication to it. And so the rigidity of saying, well, the scythe could never be a ritual tool is not helpful to me as a reader. And one of the things I've learned to do over the years is say, fuck the rules. My job is to read the answer, or is to get an answer for the client that answers the question and that makes sense. It's not to follow the rules. The rules are put there by people who feel empowered and excited by having control. You know what I mean? Your job as a reader, if you're reading for others, and even when you're reading for yourself, is to get a fucking answer that makes sense and that's logical, given the cards on the table and the question in front of you. It is not to follow some obligatory rules that were applied to a system that Lenormand was actually a playing game. Which is why I think, again, it comes down to the idea that so many of these systems were games. So fuck the rules, you know what I mean? Like, you're using a game to tell fortunes, and somehow that works, but your job is to get to the answer, not to worry about whether some other Lenormand YouTuber thinks you're doing it wrong. The people who are most likely to tell you you're doing it wrong are the people who are the least secure in their work. So, that's at least what I found in my life. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was interesting. I am looking forward to really exploring the actual world between... Let me pull it out again so you can see it. Because it just seems really cool. I don't know if I'll use it. Like I said, I get everything I need from tarot, but I do like Monica's work. And this seems like a really interesting set. So look for a more, intricate showcase of this way down the line. But anyway, be good. We'll talk soon. Take care.